Good evening and welcome to the State of the University Address for Fall 2021. This State of the University Address is going to be different this year for a couple of reasons. This is something that during my presidency I've done every fall and every spring. In the fall I do it primarily because it's homecoming. We try to do it at 10 o'clock on the Friday of homecoming so that we can catch alum, but it's open to everybody on the campus, and usually we do get an attendance from a wide variety of the campus. I thought it was appropriate this year to not do it, given the fact that we were having protests taking place, so that this would not serve as a counter-narrative in any way, shape, or form. That certainly was not my intent. The other thing that we're going to do today is that it's going to be a shorter address than usual. Unfortunately, I probably have as many slides, but I am going to make sure that we stick to pertinent information to lay the foundation for a discussion after, where I'll take questions both from the audience here. There's an ability to send questions in as well, and then we have some students who will be able to pose questions as well. I think it's important to have an open and transparent dialogue, which is why I started the State of the University Address. And for those of you who may not know, I give a State of the University Address every fall and spring to the Faculty Senate, as I did this fall on October 12th. In the spring, we also give a State of the University Address. This year was canceled by the Faculty Senate Chair primarily because of the pandemic, which is understandable. And obviously, I do this, as I said, every homecoming and at graduation as well. This one will be different as it's live streamed, as the others are, but obviously to a wider audience as well. So first, let me start by saying the current events that are taking place on campus are very important. And I hear the concerns. I want to be absolutely clear about that. I also, I'm empathetic with the students who have concerns. Whether one student had mold in his or her room or one student was affected by Wi-Fi, that's more than enough. And certainly we apologize for anybody who was inconvenienced in any way, shape, or form. I do want to emphasize that the team has been working diligently to rectify those circumstances as well. And rather than continue to put out a counter-narrative through the media and social media, which I know has been frustrating for alum and others, what we have tried to do is to focus on the issues at hand and to manage those issues as well as we can. And I'll discuss that in detail today. The reality is that we have a university that's complex. I also recognize in many ways that this is the most public-private university in America. Everybody wants to see Howard succeed. Everybody wants to participate in Howard's future. And I can certainly understand why. However, we have a responsibility as a community who are primarily of the university to make sure that we do the work that has to be done, because while people may join the caravan, while we have difficulty, they will go away soon after, and we will be left to do what has to be done to do that. I'm a triple alum of the university. I have a very deep-seated engagement here. I came here in 1988, and I've been associated with the university since then in one way, shape, or form. So this is extremely important to me in terms of what we do, and I also recognize that I'm not the only steward of the university, and I certainly don't own it. This is everybody's university who participates in the community, whether you're a student, you're a staff, a faculty member, or an alum. And so I have a responsibility as a president to make sure that I'm accountable to you, but I hope we all recognize that we all have an accountability to Howard University as well. And so I'll start by trying to address some of the pertinent issues that I think we all should be have at front of mind today. Today, General Powell's funeral took place, and I do want to start with just a moment of silence to recognize that Board of Trustee members, like him, are important stewards of the university as well. And so if you could join me in just taking a moment of silence in honor and respect for General Powell. In my presentation today, I'll cover quite a variety of things, and all of these I think are pertinent. We probably need 2 or 3 days to really have a discussion about the full breadth of what happens here at Howard University. Having said that, I do think that there are some pertinent things that I do want us to touch on. A, they will put the current circumstances in perspective, but B, I think just as important, they will give us a way forward. So first, let's start with fall 2021 enrollment. One of the difficulties at Howard University is that we provide an opportunity to those who otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity, and we can't do that for everyone who wants the opportunity. So that is becoming more and more difficult. sometimes the feedback I get is that we're too selective. And I hope as you see the numbers, you understand the complexity of making decisions around who is admitted, who is enrolled, and who is provided certain opportunities. The other major part of what we're trying to do here is to ensure that underrepresented individuals from under-resourced communities have an equal opportunity to pursue higher education. And so this year, we had well over 3,030 students in the incoming freshman class. Now, about 199 of those students are actually high school students who either participate in our dual enrollment program, or we partner with an organization that's based in New York, and public high school students in New York now can take an online class in the fall and the spring. And so about 199 of those students are participating in that. The class in the fall is focused on social justice. Last year, or I should say spring of 21, that class was focused on climate change, and it was provided for students in Flint, Michigan public school system. We received about 30,000 applications this year, and as you can see, that's a significant increase, up from 24,000 the prior year. Dr. Du Bois has been calling that the Kamala Harris effect. I would say it's a combination of the vice president's profile, but it's also a combination of the work that we've been doing, the stories that our students tell about their experiences, the stories alum tell, and also the fact that we have data that I think students are looking at very carefully in terms of making decisions. Our four-year graduation rate is 60%. One of the things that I heard recently is, why do I talk and boast about the four-year graduation rate? I talk and boast about it because when I came here in 1988, unbeknownst to me, I wouldn't find this out until I became president. When I got my first degree in 1992, which was my undergraduate degree, my freshman class at Howard had a four-year graduation rate of just about 22%. That means that 1 in every 5 students who entered in my year didn't leave here with a degree. And so when we look at our alum, that also creates a complex community as well, and something that we have to think about, and that's why I focus so much on the graduation rate. It's one thing for us to get students in here, but if we don't get them to graduate, I don't think that that's what we want to be focused on. Our 6-year graduation rate is at 64%, and when I took over as president in 2013, the 4-year graduation rate was 38%, and I'll show you a slide that shows what that improvement is, and I'll try to give you some insight into why I think that improvement has occurred. The number one reason, of course, is the quality of students that we've been bringing to the university. So we now have a total enrollment of about 12,144 students. That is the largest enrollment that we've had. The freshman class is also largest. The largest enrollment we've had at the university prior to this was actually my freshman class in 1988, which was about 11,600 students. So this is certainly the largest census that we've had. You can see on this graph here the improvement in the graduation rate from 38% four-year graduation rate. You can also see the retention rate has gone up over time from 83% to 91%. And I want to emphasize that's one thing for us to bring students in, but the next thing that we must do is we must make sure that they're able to matriculate and graduate. And graduating on time is something that I emphasize. So as most seniors tend to find out, I don't think underclassmen pay as much attention, but we give a tuition rebate of 50% of any direct payments you make on tuition to students who graduate on time or early. And that's to give an incentive, again, for people to make sure that they matriculate well. We are focused as well on a 3-year graduation rate. I know that may sound a little bit audacious, but I do want to see the 3-year graduation rate rise to 10%. We have more students who are coming with advanced placement classes. We have several programs in School of Business and College of Arts and Sciences that have now put out 3-year graduation programs so that students can pick classes appropriately to accomplish that. We raised the number of credits you can take from 18 to 21, allowing students to take, on average, if you take on average 20 credits a semester, you can actually graduate in 3 years as well. Why is that important to me? That's important because that can help lower the debt that students leave here with, but it can also get students on to the next aspect of their career quickly. And that I benefited from when I came to Howard. I did 2 years undergrad and then went to med school. Those 2 years of less undergrad tuition was those 2 years were very, very helpful, taking those 2 years out of my matriculation as well. And we're seeing more students who know what they want to do. So we also are creating programs to fulfill that, such as the BA JD program, where students can do 3 years undergrad and then go to the law school. All of these are guided at, one, getting students finished early, but also trying to lower student indebtedness as well. When you look at the incoming class, we have some trends that are sticking. The first of which is that 74% of our students are women, 26% are men. Now, I want to put this in context, because when you look at those numbers, Howard University is a complex environment. We have more women matriculating here at Howard than Spelman has in their college, and we have more males matriculating here than Morehouse has. So while we look at that ratio and we often are criticized because of the percentage of men, the reality is what we're doing here, and this is probably a good time to refer to the Howard man, still is focused on trying to give an opportunity to those who otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. The top 5 majors are currently biology, political science, psychology, nursing, media journalism, and film. Political science has overtaken psychology in recent years, but the fact that biology continues to be the #1 major is another reason why we have such a strong STEM program and strong health sciences programs in general. The average high school GPA is about 3.67. Despite the fact that we weren't using ACT scores and SAT scores, as you can imagine, students who took those tests and were comfortable with their scores submitted them as well, and those averages continue to hold nicely. Top 5 states represented are Maryland, New York, Georgia, New Jersey, and Texas. I can tell you that California is in the top 10. That continues to be a very strong recruiting state for us. And the top 5 countries, as you can see, are Jamaica, Nigeria, Ghana, Nepal, and Bahamas. So some of the keys to successful enrollment, and the keys that I think that have been working for us, is strategic recruitment. So we've looked at where students are coming from. You would notice on that top 5 list, you don't have Florida. We've actually tried to deploy folks in Florida. One of the things that we found, for instance, in Florida is that you have very good public university system, and so students tend to stay in the state of Florida. We want to compete for some of those students. So we're looking at areas where we're not necessarily attracting a lot of students from right now and trying to be strategic about that engagement. There's some states that send us students that wouldn't naturally seem to fit, as I mentioned, California, but we've had such a long-standing history of students coming from that area that we think our alumni there do a great job of that recruitment for us. We've increased financial aid support. We're recognizing that college education is becoming more expensive, and you will see that what we have been doing in terms of financial aid support has been going up. So when I talk about donations and funds, you'll see that a lot of that money is going to more scholarships, et cetera, and it's resulting in a changing of our student indebtedness. Online course offerings are also one aspect of that. There's students who may be able to afford tuition, but not be able to afford to come and live in what is becoming a more and more expensive city. And so having more online course offerings certainly, I think, has helped with successful enrollment. But a key underlying aspect is higher retention. It's great to bring students in, but we have to continue to make sure that we're providing an opportunity to retain students. And that's extremely important. Like I said, our goal is not to have a large census, it is to have a large graduating class and to get that graduation rate as close to 100% as possible. So in our Howard Forward plan, we've already surpassed our Howard Forward enrollment goal well ahead of schedule. So we now need to recalibrate based on our capacity as to how many students we should have. Now, there's 2 sides to that coin. We want to give as many people an opportunity, but we also have to make sure that we have the facilities and the infrastructure to support those students. This past year in particular, I know there were many alum who were disappointed that their legacy applicants didn't get into Howard, despite the fact that legacy applicants still are getting into Howard at a higher percentage than other applicants. But the reality is that we can't admit and enroll everyone. So we have to make tough decisions, and that naturally is going to make us more selective. Not more elite, but certainly more selective. And we have become one of the most competitive universities while still being accessible and affordable. And I'll show you in terms of pricing where we are in terms of tuition. And that's something that we pride ourselves on, but we also have to look at the economics of how we do that and make sure that we are making prudent decisions around that. We are enrolling a diverse class of students as well from states across the country and countries all over the globe. I think that's one of the great things about Howard, that you can walk across the yard and meet the entire world just walking across the yard, and I think that's important. And that's one of the things about having an in-person experience that we still think is important for students as well. So how do we support students, and what is the philosophy and the keys behind that? You know, Howard University is certainly dedicated to creating opportunities for students and removing the barriers. While we do that, we have to think of what makes us competitive, but also how can we stay affordable, but support all of the infrastructure needs and the other needs that students may need for that environment. So let's first start by looking at tuition. And this is what the average tuition looks like if you look at schools in our ranking on the US News and World Report, and we're now ranked 83. If you look at the schools in that current area around us, in the yellow, you can see that those schools certainly charge more than Howard University does. Howard University is represented here in the red. If you look at DMV, as in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, the private institutions in our area, they're represented in the green. Again, you'll see that they charge some almost $20,000 more than we do, $15,000 to $20,000. If you look at Morehouse and Spelman, and I say this carefully because I'm sure there's some Morehouse and Spelman grads, they're two colleges, they don't have the grad and professional programs we have, and so that makes the environment different. If you come here and you're a pre-dental student or a pre-law student, you have the opportunity of a law school to go listen to lectures, you have the opportunity to go down to the dental school and shadow someone, or you have the opportunity to come to the operating room with me and see if you can stomach seeing guts, etc. And so that can change your decision about med school. So the environment in which your undergrad campus is a factor in terms of what we charge for tuition. Having said that, you will see from this, we still charge less than those institutions. And so a Howard education is extremely affordable at this price, and we intend to try to continue to make it affordable. If you look at undergraduate fees, there then is a really big gap in terms of what we charge and what we provide compared to our peers as well. And again, that's something we have to look at. Now, one of the things I will mention that has been a change, and I have seen some questions from parents about this issue, is the issue of what we charge for health insurance. We've made a significant change in the past academic year about health insurance. In the past, our health insurer, regardless of who it was, it's currently UHS for students and Cigna for the employees, would not allow students who were 25 and under to opt out, right? And the way health insurance works, as you can imagine, the more healthy people you have, the lower the premium is. But they would not allow us to opt out in order to keep the price down. We convinced them that there was more of a desire from parents and students to be able to opt out because a lot of you are coming to us on your parents' insurance, and therefore they gave us that option. Once they gave us that option, it means that the pool of students left is now smaller, and therefore the premium is going to go up. So all of you who are continuing students would have seen a significant rise in the health insurance. And that's something that we're continuing to have a conversation with, but I think the opportunity to opt out means that on average, what your parents are paying for health insurance, seeing that you're covered under their insurance, is actually less by not having to pay Howard University as well on average, recognizing that some of you are still using our insurance, and as a result, that will come with a different type of bill as well. So if you look at where we rank in terms of best value school, we've moved 89 spots over time. We're now number 41 in the country. And as you can imagine, the schools ahead of us are a lot of state schools that get a different kind of support and have a different type of tuition base. But for a private institution, this move has been significant. Despite that, 44% of the incoming fall 2021 class was eligible for Pell Grants. And let me put that in perspective. If you look at private institutions in the DMV, their range of Pell Grant students ranges from about 12% to 19%. So that means that they have a larger number of paying customers. One of the recent discussions someone was having is the fact that GW, for instance, has housing for juniors. That Foggy Bottom area is extremely expensive, and those students are able to pay cash. So while they provide housing, if you look at the pricing of the housing, it is very high. Many of you, look at apartments around here, and that pricing is starting to go up as well as the neighborhood gentrifies. So I think, again, we have to put that in perspective in terms of when you add in the overall cost of education, whether it's tuition and room and board, you put everything together, it can become pretty expensive pretty quickly. Medical school applications this past year was 7,500. We had almost a 40% increase. I think a lot of that had to do with the pandemic, and we really were out in the public talking about the fact that we provide a pipeline. We've graduated more African-American physicians than any other single institution in America. We send more African-American students from undergrad to med school than any other institution in the country as well. Now, despite that, we enrolled 125 medical students this past fall, 79 of whom Howard was the only school they got into. So when we talk about selectivity, I also want to be clear that while we are attracting more students, we are making an effort to give students who otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to go to med school, for instance, anywhere else. Now, when I applied to med school, I was part of the BSMD program. I could have still applied to other med schools who did not require an undergraduate degree, but required you to have completed a certain number of credits. I didn't, because I couldn't afford to travel anywhere to go interview. Had no interest in even going across town to look. So I was one of those medical students where this was the only medical school I applied to and therefore attended. The students who are coming to us have applied to medical schools all over the country. Didn't get an interview, got an interview at Howard, but because we have a secondary application that looks to see, are they from an underserved area? Are they going to serve an underserved population? We decided to give them that opportunity. So despite that selectivity, I want to be very, very clear that I still think we are providing an opportunity for a really broad base of students, and that's important to us. Law school, similarly, had 2,600 applications. That's a 63.2% increase. Now, I joke with VP Harris that while everybody knows that she went to Howard, I think people sometimes confuse that and think she went to Howard for undergrad and law school. She didn't. She just went here for undergrad. And so she may have had an impact on this increase as well, but we'll take it. We enrolled 169 law students this fall. Again, that's an increase in class. Dean Holly Walker and her faculty and staff have done an incredible job there. When I first hired her, that incoming law school class, I believe, was down to about 130 and has steadily increased through their recruitment efforts. And we're in an environment where there's some question about the value of a law education, and the fact that she and Dean Holly Walker and her faculty and staff are attracting students at this rate, I think, is great as well. Now, the pandemic certainly heightened student needs. There's several things that happened last year that I must point out. One, obviously, was financial insecurity. With the economy shutting down so rapidly, people losing their jobs, food insecurity. So we made a very tough decision, and that was to keep our food pantry open the entire time during the pandemic. We alerted students and families in the DMV area who may have wanted to access. And I remind you, while we're still getting around today and we're using masks and so on safely, back in March of 2020, if you think back, we were really inside. It was difficult to move around. There were curfews all around the place. And so keeping the food pantry open we felt was a very important aspect of what we did. We had housing insecurity as well. So last year, we actually housed students despite the fact that we had an active pandemic taking place and our residence halls were closed down. We opened access for students who basically said to us they had nowhere to go. We also housed some students at an off-campus location as well, at the expense of the university as well. So our interest in taking care of students with housing insecurity is extremely high, and I think we demonstrated that in the pandemic, and we've continued to do that. Physical and mental health challenges was another thing that we recognized. So we increased our counseling service offerings, recognizing that the laws are very prohibitive in terms of practicing that type of art across boundaries. The US government did open that up to allow for that to be done, and so we expanded our services and we were able to continue to provide help to our students around mental health challenges. We also offered testing on campus during that period of time, and once the vaccine became available, we tried to offer the vaccine widely to people in our community. Access to technology was another issue as well. So we secured several types of hotspots and Wi-Fi devices to distribute to our students as well, through some generous donations as well, I may add. So overall, the university distributed about $169 million in institutional and donor-funded aid last year alone, in addition to trying to lower or eliminate student debt. We waived some fees. Obviously, you weren't using some of those services, so that was the right thing to do. We had some direct cash payments through some of the government funding as well, which has been repeated this fall. And as I said, we supplied emergency housing and meal assistance. So when you add that support up, that's another $38 million. So we supplied well over $200 million in support to Howard students. And the emergency funding, many of you would be familiar with. The Howard Easement and Assistance Relief Trust, the HART grant, was actually a grant that we supplied through Howard funds, and part of the funds we used for this as well was from donations like the Mackenzie Scott donation that we received. And obviously the CARES Act and her funding supplied as well. So for the return to campus, there were a couple of things that we looked at. One is we did a survey. 95% of the continuing students said they wanted an in-person experience. We had to look at how could we do that as safely as possible. So to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of every student, we decided to set up our Bison Safe, and the Safe is support, advocate, facilitate, and educate. The goal was to make sure we had robust testing. We got a generous grant from Thermo Fisher to actually stand up a regional hub lab, and we actually do testing for some regional HBCUs as well. They send their samples to us, and they have access via the computer system to look at what those results look like. We launched that app as well to ensure that everyone would use it, and what we've seen since everybody has been back is an increasing utilization of the Bison Safe app, which is helping us significantly, as you can imagine. We put out data beginning on May 17th announcing that students on campus for the fall had to be vaccinated. We think this was important to keep everybody safe. I know that there's a lot of discussion about mandating vaccines in the country, but again, as someone with significant vulnerabilities, I think students coming to Howard, the only way that we can ensure a safe environment was to have that mandatory. We gave an August 1 deadline for students to submit their proof of vaccination, and some students submitted it to ResLife because it was also mandatory to move into the residence halls, and some students submitted it to MedProctor. So for a little period of time, we had a gap in just being clear as to how many students did that, but I'll show you some data on that as well. And then we had an October 8 deadline for employees to submit proof of vaccination. 100% of the students living in the residence halls are vaccinated. And so I certainly want to commend the students for that. 98% of all students have actually complied with the vaccine mandate and have actually uploaded. I still am convinced that the 100 or so students who just haven't got around to uploading, and so we want to encourage, if there's anyone listening who hasn't done that yet, we want you to do that because we do want to have 100% rate. Now, and that number excludes anyone with an exemption. If you have an exemption, you still can't stay in the residence halls, but you can certainly attend class in person. 69.2% of the faculty have provided proof, and that excludes those on sabbatical and teaching remotely. So one of the things here, again, is as we move to Workday, the issues that we had with the network, I think may be responsible for the lower number, and so we are continuing to ask for faculty to submit that vaccination as well. We want parents and students to be comfortable and convinced that they're going to be attending class in a safe environment. About 70.7% of the staff have provided proof of vaccination. And I want to thank Monique McClung, who's here today from the Howard University Staff Organization, for assisting with that. That number was significantly lower, and she and her organization certainly helped move that number. We have significant testing requirements with weekly PCR testing, and our students and faculty and staff are testing on different days based on the alphabet, and I've been getting a weekly test. I know it can be onerous to do it, and one of the things that we've seen over time is the proof that our positivity rate is really low. Our positivity rate right now is 0.67%. This information is on the website as well, as we've been tracking it. DC's overall average positivity rate is about 3%, so we're significantly below that, which again is commendation to the students, faculty and staff for following the rules, for getting vaccinated. And as you can see, we've done about 72,595 PCR tests have been performed on campus over this time. And as I just pointed out, that positivity rate has been dropping, and so we're very happy to see that. Looking at the numbers, I have to be honest, we're going to interrogate DC Department of Health and CDC around the requirement for testing vaccinated individuals within our community. We're hoping that we can get to a point where we'll be able to convince the DC Department of Health to only test those who are unvaccinated in our environment, and to only test the vaccinated individuals if you present with symptoms or an exposure, as recommended by the CDC. In some circumstances, if you're exposed, the CDC is not necessarily recommending that you get tested or quarantine. And if you do have a test, how quickly you can come back to the environment is also shortening as well. So we certainly are supportive of that. The transformation to Workday has already produced significant benefits. We had a July 6th go live. Anytime you change an enterprise-wide system such as this, it can be fraught with difficulties, but it was important for us to do that. This is a cloud-based system. It's very efficient. It has a student module that avoids us having to try to interface with Bison Web and Banner in the way that we do today. Everything will be in one place. The reason why I think that's important is because it's going to help with customer service. If you call the bursar's office and there's an issue in financial aid that they need to look up right now, I don't think all of those things work as smoothly as we'd like. With Workday and the launching of the student portal, those things will certainly bring more efficiency. So right now, we certainly have a much more efficient process in HR and finance as a result. It helps with our cybersecurity posture because it's cloud-based as well. And it certainly can help with increasing audit controls as well. So we certainly are excited about this. The Workday student, we've already agreed with Workday to bring this on. It's a 2-year project to bring it on completely, and it will take time to launch that, but that's the road that we're on. Student housing, I think, especially given all of the discussion around this, I want to take some time here to make sure that we cover this in detail. The goal here, obviously, is to provide a best-in-class dormitory experience at Howard for all our students. We need to ensure that living accommodations in the residence halls are healthy and safe. That has to be an uncompromising position that we must take. We have to establish an effective system for problems to be reported and addressed expeditiously as well. And with our housing partners, this is an area that I will admit I think we need to work on and we need to improve. And we have to create a transparent process for housing students and responding to issues in the residence halls. During the fall semester thus far, we've had reports of mold in about 41 of our 2,700 rooms. If this happens once, as I said before, it's not acceptable. The reality is, not having anybody occupying the residence halls for a year, as with hotels, etc., the chance of having mold appear is heightened. We had a long, wet, hot summer, and that has extended into the fall. And so these are issues that we have to mitigate. So we need better performance of preventative maintenance, certainly. And we've had some water damage, some due to accidental human error. The issue in Tower East occurred because a student hung something on the sprinkler system and it went off. I actually lived in a room in the West Towers, room 804, when I was in medical school, and we set the sprinkler off for a different reason. We were roughhousing and playing soccer in the room, and the ball hit the sprinkler. That was torturous because we were on the 8th floor, and it soaked all the way down to the 1st floor. So I've been there. I've been that student to cause that. I've been that student to have that tough conversation about the damage that it caused. And I've also been that student that received the grace that I didn't have to pay for any of the damage. So I certainly understand that accidents do happen. We have to still respond quickly to that and make sure that we can get those things in order, get those rooms fixed quickly. And we certainly have to improve the communication, I think, when those things happen so that people are clear as to why there's damage and what's happening. So what exactly is our situation with what we have in terms of housing? Over the past 5 years, 7 of the 8 dorms have either been renovated or newly built. So we have, I think, significantly improved physical structure. Where I think we're lacking and we have to do more is in preventative maintenance. So avoiding trouble when issues do occur, responding to them quickly so that many residents are not inconvenienced for any length of time. And I certainly take full responsibility for that. I think that's one of the areas that we've fallen short on and one of the areas that we certainly intend to improve. While we have housing partners that are responsible for this, ultimately they're housing Howard students. And so we don't just simply pass that on to them. While we have a contract, we are always going to be riding herd with them to make sure that they're doing what we expect them to do. So we now have some 5,714 beds available in our inventory with a 94% occupancy rate. So I want to be absolutely clear. We have 6% of our beds that are vacant. So that's about 200 plus beds. If there's anyone that does not have housing or has housing insecurity, we are prepared to house those students. We have the capacity to do so and we intend to do so. But those students have to identify themselves. Dr. Evers interacted with a student earlier this year who was living in a car and offered that student housing. And that's something that is not going to be the exception to the rule. As I said last year, even in the pandemic, with all the residence halls closed, we opened the access and we housed students who were in the access. And that's something that we intend to continue to do. If you look at the 41 reported cases of suspected fungal growth, that represents about a little less than 1%. As I said, if it happens in one room, it's a concern. 100% of those students who have rooms that were impacted have the opportunity to be relocated. I know when students are in a certain hall, you develop an affinity for folks around you. Moving your room is not exactly something you want to do. Some students bring a little bit more than others, and so moving everything to another room is also inconvenient. So some students choose to move temporarily until the room is remediated and move back, and we certainly will accommodate that as well. Currently, these are the things that we've been undertaking to ensure what's taking place and to amplify our response around this maintenance of care. We've had air sampling testing being done. We've been documenting that. We've been doing visual inspections as well. We've set up a HU Cares triage. Some of our maintenance activity includes more aggressive cleaning. And so when the protest began, what we did was I wanted everybody on my team to be clear about what was taking place in the residence halls. I wanted to be absolutely sure that we had a sense of how widespread the problem was and what the problem looked like. And so one of the things that we launched was a hypercare activity that included everybody on my cabinet is assigned to a single dorm, and every single day they are invited to go make rounds in the dorm to knock on doors, etc. I know some of you are getting tired of seeing them and asking them not to come back to your room, and we certainly are going to not have them bother you. But the goal is not to harass anyone. The goal is to just try to make sure that we're seeing problems early, and if there are any gaps that our housing partners are leaving, we want to make sure that we're filling those gaps as quickly as we can. We also have brought in multiple vendors to check systems and to double check and triple check to make sure that there's nothing that is either causing any type of fungal growth outbreak or any other issue that might be causing any issue around bursting pipes or anything like that. To continue to support that, we also created an email as well. I get a copy of every email that goes to HU Cares as well so that I can get a sense of what's occurring. Our cabinet members all get a copy as well, and those who are assigned to that particular dorm are the ones responsible for also responding, in addition to the primary housing partner team being able to access the information as well. So this is something that is an amplified response. I want to be clear. This is not something that we expect to have to do on a continual basis. We're able to see certain things that we could give our housing partners feedback about, and to make sure that there's no gap in the services that we're supplying. This is an aging campus. There's no doubt about this. Some of the classrooms you sit in look exactly like the classrooms I sat in 1988. So that's not lost on me at all. what we have tried to do and what I'll try to explain here is that we started off with trying to repair and to renovate and enhance the residents' living and then move in on the academic building. So as I said, 7 of the 8 residence halls were renovated. And then what we then did was move into, so we started with Douglas Undergrad Library, Blackburn. And what you'll see in this presentation in these next few slides is what we intend to do with the other buildings. Now it's difficult when you're here for 3 or 4 years because all of this is not going to be done in that time period. But over time, it will occur, and it has been occurring. So folks who left here 4 years ago could come back and tell you that the towers looks different, the quad looks different, College Hall North and South wasn't there. There are other folks who've never had the library, the undergrad library access, and so that's new. And so those are the types of things we'll be doing. So let me review some of these. First, I'll start with housing. This is on Sherman Avenue, so it's right up from the towers. And that lot, those lots there next to the trellis belong to Howard. Our intent is to put up apartment-style buildings there. This, by the way, is our campus master plan, which was released last April. And I recognize that this is not fun reading for students and others alike, but the reality is these are the things that we put out in terms of what our plans are, et cetera. So the goal here is to put some apartment-style residences. Right now, if somebody comes with a family, we don't have housing here on campus really to provide for them. If somebody has kids, you know, a spouse, et cetera. And this would help with that. It would also help with, you know, other needs that others may have. The Wonder Plaza site that you walk by all the time that houses Negril and Subway, Chipotle, et cetera. We're going to continue retail on that first floor, but we have an RFP out to, again, put residences up above that would provide housing. We intend to put wellness and student support functions in there, including a wellness center with some recreation. And we're looking at a potential university club as well for faculty. The Center for Arts and Communications for the new Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts, as well as the Cathy Hughes School of Communications. One of the things that I spoke to Chadwick Boseman a lot, and our new dean there, Dean Rashad, is about the collaboration that should be taking place between those two schools. That Childers Hall is an older building, is going to be designated a historical site, so that facade has to stay. I know that when we put up a new building, people are going to ask why we left that there, and that's it's an African-American architect from back in the day who built that building, and so it's going to get a historic designation. So that's not something that we can knock down. That facade will stay there, and behind that, we'll build the Arts and Communications Center. We intend to build a health sciences complex as well. I think this is important for us to put up as we build the new hospital in that C.B. Powell building, which is now vacated and was the old Freedman's Hospital. We'll put the health sciences complex in there and also a new STEM complex. The buildings that are of concern include physics, chemistry, biology, and engineering, and we have to look for an opportunity to move those buildings into modern facilities as well. The new hospital would be where the former Nursing and Allied Health School was, and just to be clear, the health sciences complex would include new facilities for nursing, allied health, pharmacy, dentistry, and the med school as well. The athletics is an issue that we have to look at. Right now, we share, everybody does everything in there, both intramural and varsity, and that's something that obviously we have to change. We need to decamp Bird Gymnasium to some extent and try to move some of that activity outside of that building and to change what's taking place in there as well. We're looking at a Howard University Union that would have a wellness and fitness center, and that will go where the current middle school is as we try to move the middle school and the School of Education into the minor building, which is the building, if you're facing the A building, the building to the right. The power plant was an issue a few years ago. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner what the power plant is beginning to look like. This project, again, is a multi-year project. And again, that was an older facility that was at risk. And we obviously had to blow up as a result of that. This is Green Stadium. I'll point out, despite some of the renovations and even the new box, we have a new track, but the reality is that that track is only 6 lanes wide. So we can't host meets at Green Stadium. And given the athletes we're recruiting, that's something that we have to look at. There's no way to expand that track, so we have to start looking at a new site to house our athletics facilities. Obviously, Blackburn Center is undergoing renovation. One of the things that I want to point out, because I've seen pictures online about unfinished spaces in there, and just to be clear, the first floor and the ground floor where the cafeteria were, our intent was always to open that first. Everybody across the world has had supply chain issues, so the flooring, for instance, for upstairs is something that came in late. The lighting came in late. All summer, I was going in there, and those workers were giving me updates on that. The basement, we intend to replace the bowling alley completely and the recreation facility down there as well. So I just want to be clear that there are spaces in here that aren't completely finished, and obviously that work has come to a halt, but because of supply chain, these projects are going to take a little longer to complete. This is a small but important thing. I've been on this campus since 1988. I've never seen this fountain working. It's a small thing, but we're trying to pay attention to all the details around campus in terms of not just the aesthetics, but why some of these things were there. I never even realized that there were flower pots down there as well, as you can see above the fountain. So we're trying to take a very close look at just about every single thing that we can look at. The quad obviously has gotten a lot of attention. Simple things like these connectors that the young ladies in the quad now have. Any of you who've stayed in the quad who are upperclassmen will say, not having those connectors was pretty inconvenient. Seems like a small thing, but we felt it was important. The courtyard also, I think, is a good addition, and we're going to continue to pay attention. I mentioned the undergrad library already. I think this was the place that I studied the most when I was a freshman here, and it's a place that now I take a lot of pride in going into to see and seeing the transformation that it is. Frederick Douglass Hall as well was affected by the steam plant, but was well overdue for renovation. And I think that those classroom spaces are really improving. Research is really important to us. We want to be an R1 research status, so we are making investments in this area. I'm proud to say that we had a new record in terms of grant and contracts, so I want to congratulate the faculty in particular who do this work to get there. And I do think that we're well on our way to getting there. I think more undergraduate students are being exposed to research, and our graduate programs are going to be able to expand as well because of the partnerships. And the student outcomes are important. It's one thing for you to matriculate. We have to look at professional development. Can you get into the types of jobs and the arenas you want? So it's very important that the quality of the education you get is a high quality and that the opportunities that you have are high. So recruiting donors to the university to support that is important. We started with a GRACE grant program many years ago. This was an unfunded mandate. I went to the board with a theory that if we supplied a GRACE grant that filled the gap for students with an expected family contribution of 0, we could improve the graduation rate. And sure enough, that graduation rate went up to 90-something% for those students. And if you look anywhere across the country, expected family contribution is 0, with that high graduation rate is unheard of. So I'm very thankful for the Browns, who are alum, who've given us a $5 million gift. Our goal is to close on $100 million. We have a pledge that our team is working on for $10 million and another pledge for $20 that we will close on before the end of the year. And that second would probably be a matching amount. So we're well on our way to raising that $100 million to support students. The Chadwick A. Boseman Scholarship as well is important from Netflix, $5.4 million endowed scholarship. One of the things that I have heard from students, well, that's only 4 students. The reality is this will exist in perpetuity. So our goal is to raise funds like this. It won't cover every student initially, but the more we do this, we will get to a point where the majority of students who are attending can get support. And there are several other programs like that, as you can imagine. I do want to just touch, as start to close here, on a couple of things. We have many new centers with, I think, the right types of focus on a campus like ours. You saw how many students are females, and having a center for women, gender, and global leadership was long overdue, as an example. And so we're very grateful for the support of one of our trustees to do that. The Marriott Sorensen Center is the largest, this is the largest donation to the School of Business. Again, hospitality is an area we had been involved in. We want to get back there. A lot of the focus here is on the leadership in hospitality, just to be clear. We want people to be opening their own hotels and running those. Faculty development has been key. We did have an issue with faculty onboarding. A lot of it related to the Workday launch as well as some process improvement that we need. And we've created a committee with the provost that's looking at this. I myself am seeing a significant change as we approach the spring already with people putting in activities. I'm very proud of what the faculty are doing based on the faculty development support. A significant number of these faculty members have gone on to get tenure, and we're very proud of that. And so as I close, I want to mention why are we raising funds? We're raising funds to support primarily students' ability to attend the university, and then two, to support faculty and other educational activities. And we had a banner year last year. We raised about $170 million. When I started, we were raising about 3 to 8 million the year prior to my starting, so we're at about 20x. The first quarter, we've been had a very strong first quarter as well, and so we intend to continue that. The key is to raise more funds, to have a significant endowment that can then support the activity that we wanted to support. While everybody makes makes a big deal about the large gifts, and yes, we've had the $40 million Mackenzie gift, the $20 million from the Marriott, we've had a $36 million gift from Bloomberg. The reality is that our alum also gave in record amounts last year as well, a total of $9 million from about 8,365 alum, with a 36% increase in total gifts received. So for that, we're very, very happy. I've seen a question about what we've done with the Mackenzie gift. We put it into 5 categories. Put into Grace Grant Endowment. We're going to announce an endowed chair shortly from that as well. We have a social innovation and entrepreneurship plan that we're supporting through an endowment there, and we put it into faculty development. We had to retain some faculty by offering larger salaries, and that money came out of there, and ongoing campus infrastructure projects. And so the finances are important. Our endowment, as I've heard from many of you, is the largest among the HBCUs. We have about $804 million in the endowment. Overall, for all the investments we have, is about $900 million. But to put that in perspective, Harvard's endowment was about $42 million, and this year they had a banner year, and it's now $53 billion. I said 42 million, I misspoke. 42 billion, and it's now 53 billion. Again, just to put that in perspective, if they take 5% of their endowment every year, in perpetuity, they can give Howard enough money to run the entire school. And they could give us a little extra to make everybody go to school for free. Right? That's the difference in resources. So when we talk about an endowment, while we have an endowment of $800 million, we can't just go spend it all. We have to try to invest it to raise funds. This year, we had a very good year, a 25% increase. But you have to remember, when you have an endowment of $52 billion, you can show up for that IPO, and you can show up for the things like Facebook, et cetera, which if you get in early, you're going to get your 20x return. They're not coming to us and asking us about that. We're now having conversations with those type of venture capitalists who are willing to let us in. Now, to get in, you might have to put in $100 million. If I put in $100 million of that 804, and that's a missed bet, I don't think anybody would be pleased with me. So we have to come in at a lower level, 10 million, maybe 15 or 20. But the first thing is we have to get our foot in the door. And that's the difference between the haves and the have-nots in these circumstances. That doesn't mean that we're going to let them outpunch us. So what we've been doing is trying to get our finances in order. As you can see here, our bottom line this year is a whopping 185 million positive to the bottom line. A lot of it had to do with fundraising, but a lot of it also had to do with operational efficiencies. And I won't bore you with the details in here, but the point is that we have increased what we're doing in every aspect of the university that brings in revenue. We have to control expenses as best we can. The one area that our expenses are going to increase and balloon is going to be in salaries. The job market is tough. People can move. People can take a job in California and stay right here in DC, so the job market is really, really tough, and so we have to increase that. The issue of faculty salaries is a very pertinent one. We're going to add $14 million to the wage bill for faculty beginning in January as well, so that we could keep them. Hospital operating revenue and expenses has also been significantly improved, and so we expect to continue to improve and grow our enrollment steadily, and increase our online program revenue growth as well with several things that we're doing. But we have to use our new ERP system, Workday, for more efficiency, and we certainly want to continue to grow in contributions and grants. I'm going to stop here. You know, as I close, I just want to say a couple of things. Obviously, this is a difficult time for the university. There's no doubt about that. And I recognize and I hear and I certainly apologize for anybody who has taken umbrage to what we attempt to put out. I'm happy to answer questions. I know I'll get lots of questions about some of these things, but I want to be absolutely clear about my commitment to make sure that we're continuing to build a university that can stand its own today and in the future. That is a process. It is a process that takes time. It is a process that requires all of us to participate. Part of the students' participation is feedback. Part of my participation is a listening ear. And my team's participation and the Board of Trustees' participation is to make sure that we have a robust plan as we move forward. We're not always going to agree. I want to also be clear about that. The journey and the path we take is not always going to be one in which we agree. But what must happen is that we must have the dialogue. We must have the conversation about what and why. Some of these issues are complex to understand, so I'm always happy to attempt to explain it. I think most of these things we're going to get right. Some of the things we're not going to get right. And when we don't, we're going to own that. But we are always going to be committed to fixing those things. And so I appreciate you listening, and I know I went over. I apologize. On the back end, if everybody would bear with me, I'll add as much on the back end to the question and answer, if that's okay with everybody, so that nobody leaves here feeling that they got cut short on any questions they wanted to ask. So thank you very much. So who has the responsibility for the first question here? No pressure. Okay.
All right, well, hello, good evening. I'm Tammy Jones, senior biology major, chemistry minor from New Jersey. And like we can all agree, history is made every single day at Howard University, and a lot of history has been made this semester. And amongst the protests, and amongst the time us, the students have spent in Blackburn, the strong question that everyone has is, why haven't you met with the students in Blackburn, and will you meet with the students in Blackburn?
Yeah, so actually I met with the students in Blackburn. I met with the student leader. The protest started on October 12th. I met with them on October 14th and had a conversation. I think the issue that quickly rose to the top of the discussion was about immunity. My advice to the student at that time was that they needed to get a lawyer in order to engage with our general counsel. As you can imagine, that's a legal document that is written up by lawyers, and that's not my forte. Plus, I don't think if I have my general counsel interact with students without representation, I think that would be unethical. So I suggested to them that they get a lawyer. This was on October 14th. The next time I heard from them was on October 24th, that they had a lawyer and they wanted to meet on the 25th. And ever since then, the university's lawyer has been engaged with their lawyer. I've also made overtures as recently as last night about being willing to sit down and have a conversation with them. And so I don't have any apprehension about having a conversation with them, which is why I met with them early on. The takeover of the Blackburn was at the tail end of smaller protests. My team actually engaged with the students during that period of time. And I'm probably going to do something and say something that I probably shouldn't, but for the sake of full transparency, you know, my team was having chat and choose with those students a couple of weeks prior. I didn't participate because I was hospitalized with pneumonia in the ICU for a week. I didn't come out and talk about that before because I'm not about making excuses. The first day I could show up to meet with them, that's when I met with them.
Yes, Thank you. So you mentioned something about immunity. So how does the process of immunity happen? It's my understanding the students are asking for legal immunity as well as academic immunity.
Yeah, that's a great conversation. So let's talk about legal immunity first. Legal immunity means that what we're saying to the students is we're not going to take any action against students, right, legally. That has to be within confines, right? That building had a multi-million-dollar renovation. Let's say there's significant vandalism to the building. That's something that we need to negotiate. What's the extent of that? And the reason why I think that's important in this particular circumstance, and I've tried to say this in my letters and probably haven't articulated it as well as I probably should, is that there are also people who are not Howard students in the building. I can't give those students legal immunity, right? I mean, give those non-students legal immunity, right? If somebody from George Mason is in my building and they break something or they do something, I can't do that. The second thing is, let's say a student or somebody around the building says that they were assaulted in some way, shape, or form during that occupation. That's a criminal act. I don't have jurisdiction over saying that's legal immunity. So part of why the lawyers have to get involved is that they have to decide what the definition of that is. So that's one aspect. Academic immunity, I'm not sure what that is in terms of definition. And let me tell you why. The one thing that I've learned as a provost and in this role is that I don't get to tell the faculty what to do, period. I don't change their grades. I don't tell them, you know, what to do in terms of how to deal with a student who has missed classes, et cetera. What I will do is appeal to the faculty to make sure that they give students as much grace as possible who participated. But we can't say, at least I can't say by edict that any of those students should just get, you know, some kind of blanket immunity. I think that's a tough, it's a tough discussion to have. Now, we do want faculty to engage with the students and to give them as much grace as possible, right? But in terms of grades, all of those things, in terms of keeping their scholarships, et cetera, those are things that I'm supportive of and would advocate for, but we also have rules. So the student who is not protesting, who is going to class every day, that student gets a C, drops their average based on their contract for their scholarship. What grades does that student get, and is it legally appropriate for that student to not keep their scholarship while they were going to class versus somebody else who was protesting? So we have to be cautious. I mean, all of these things seem simple. It seems like Dr. Frederick should just sign a document and say everybody has academic and legal immunity, but it just doesn't work that simple. It's a lot more complicated when you get into the nuances of it. I'm pretty sure our faculty will be supportive of students, let me be clear about that, but when you try to put that together for students, you want to be cautious about it. And I'll be frank with you, one of the things I saw that does have me concerned is that there will be no way to identify them. And I understand that people don't want any retaliation, and I'll go on record to say I don't intend to retaliate against any student who was protesting. But if we don't know who the students are, and you weren't in the building, and you can show up and say, I was in the building, so I want this accommodation, that seems a little bit loose as well, right? And faculty are probably going to rightfully come to me and complain that, you know, what am I doing? I mean, I take you back to when we first shut down. Remember, we had a lot of discussion about pass-fail, right? Going to pass-fail. And I try to say to everyone that I've got to get the faculty to do that. I can't just say we're going to go to pass-fail. So we had a discussion. We had a town hall, Provost Wuto, and we tried to get to a point where we could have pass-fail. And we did. But that's not a decision that, as the president, I can make unilaterally, just to be clear. I am supportive. And the very first day I met, I said, I'm supportive of academic and legal immunity. I can't, by edict, do it. The lawyers have to get involved to figure out the parameters of it out, but we also have to recognize that there limitations to how far I can go.
Okay. So, based on my understanding what you said, it becomes a question of academic integrity and the discretion of the faculty and the professors in terms of academic immunity. And in regard to legal immunity, it becomes a question of that we cannot give legal immunity to non-Howard University students. So how, is there a way in which Howard University students specifically can be given legal immunity and not those non-Howard
yep,
students?
absolutely. And we've sent back a recommendation based on their template and request. We've sent back a recommendation about how we could get there. The point is just that there's an issue as well of aiding and abetting. Right? Non-Howard student does something, Howard student there, that person implicates the Howard student. You know, there could be back and forth about that. So we have sent back a suggestion about that. There absolutely is a way, and that's why I think lawyers have to get involved. You know, I can't do that. I wouldn't do a good job of it. I don't understand the law well enough to do that, and I think the lawyers have to work that out. But I am supportive of it, which I think is the premise of your question.
Okay, yes, I have more questions, but I'll let the ladies
Sure.
ask.
Good evening, Dr. Frederick. Good evening, everyone. I'm Drew Lewis. I'm a third-year law student from Brooklyn, New York. I'm also
You can help us up this moment.
yeah. I'm also the Student Bar Association president of the law school. So tonight you spoke a lot about the campus master plan, and I wanted to know if that extended to West Campus,
Yeah.
and if there are any renovation plans that you have in mind for West Campus.
Yeah, so, you know, West Campus right now houses the Divinity School and the law school. So one of the first things we have as a plan is to move back to the East Campus and to bring the Divinity School back there. That would then, you know, afford us the opportunity to pay more attention to what's happening with the law school. You know, it's a campus where people call me all the time and offer me $1 billion for the campus, and they have a Saudi investor who wants the campus because of where it's located. And so we've made some improvements. I think there's more that we can do, but I think the first thing is we need to get Divinity back to their spiritual home, and then once we do that, I think we can focus on the needs for the West Campus. And I also want to express my appreciation for the faculty, staff, and the students of both the Divinity School and the law school for being, you know, patient with this process. I think the law school has been pretty accommodating of having the Divinity School there, and the Divinity School folks have been pretty understanding of having to be there while we try to redo the East Campus.
Thank you.
Great. Dr. Frederick, my name's Alberta Forbes Baker. I am from the class of 83, 91, liberal arts, graduate school in economics. Also, I'm the president of the Howard University Alumni Club of DC. Thank you so much for this opportunity to have this dialogue. My question, or at least one of my first questions, kind of going back to the housing situation. You've already kind of spoke to how the dorms, especially the quad, with it kind of the mold and how we believe that situation evolved. Prior to students coming back in the summer, after the dorms had sat for the period of time that it did, what's that process like in terms of, I mean, was there just a sample of rooms that were inspected, or what is that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do something called summer readiness every summer to get the entire campus ready. And that involves a very extensive process. It involves us inspecting all of the rooms across campus in every building, academic buildings, et cetera, looking at the heating system, the cooling system. In some cases where we have still have blackboards, we're looking at whiteboards, we're trying to change those out if we need to. We also launched several projects. So there's some schools that may need a new HVAC system, or some schools may need new windows. So it's a very extensive process. In the residence halls, it does involve inspecting every single room. As a matter of fact, I myself walked every one of the residence halls myself, and in particular the quad, because when I first went in there, and I have to admit, I never had been in there as a student. Obviously, it's a freshman women's dorm. There's no reason for me to be in there, and I had never been in there. But when I first walked it, I was surprised at, you know, the age of it, the way the rooms were configured, the fact that the courtyard wasn't set up for use. And so it did become, I would say, a bit of a pet project. So I went in there myself often, and I saw several people in rooms, et cetera. The thing is, in a room that's sitting, you may see mold. But as you start moving people in and we're using the cooling system, if the humidity isn't right, all of those things if you have standing water for whatever reason, people, somebody may take off something wet. All of those things could contribute to it. So the wear and tear that occurs is hard to replicate in a building that's empty. So when we do summer readiness, we do check things like the temperature. We do several other things to try to make sure that the buildings are steady and ready. But the true test is always going to be, when people move in. And with that risk is if they move in and there's a problem, then you've got to deal with it. Even something like the pipes, right? Everybody having a pipe on at the same time is a very different simulation to other things. We have laundry, so washing, clothes and stuff like that. The showers, do you end up with standing water or not? Somebody has to really take a shower. You've got to get, stuff going into the drain, and does it drain well? The sewage, all of those things. It's tough, I think, to replicate that. But we have a very extensive summer readiness program that we apply to the entire campus, including the residence halls.
So with you being a son of Howard, and that you noted that you lived in the dorms, I lived in Crandall, Park Square. So would you, some of our alum believe that this is kind of a systemic issue in terms of housing conditions? There's always just all over time, we've always somewhat had substandard, and you have addressed, the fact that that's what we're moving toward, but had this protest not taken place, would these issues have been, highlighted? Or?
Yeah, I still stand by something, and I want to be careful about this, because I think when I do respond to this in particular, I think people feel that I'm not hearing or giving voice, to people who have had issues. So I'm going to repeat it again. If one person had a mold problem, it's one too many. In the bigger scheme of things, in 2,700 rooms, the physical infrastructure of our residence halls today is as good as it's ever been because of all of the renovations we've done, the new buildings at College Hall North and South. When you look at the entire inventory, the quality of the rooms is much higher than it's ever been. Having said that, one of the issues that we have to be concerned about on an ongoing basis is deferred maintenance and preventative maintenance, right? What are we doing for the upkeep? And we have housing partners that are now responsible for that. So we've got to make sure that they're doing that at a very high level. That includes duct cleaning and all the other things that come with it. So we can renovate the building, but if that upkeep isn't at a high level, we're going to have some of these issues. So I would say the physical infrastructure is much better. I lived in Sutton Plaza, which was on 13th and Vermont. I lived in Meridian Hall. Again, I might be biased, but when I go into those rooms, they look significantly different than the rooms that I met. And I don't know if you had a chance to go back into Crandall yourself and see the rooms, but one of the things that we were hoping to do at homecoming is to have residents go and see those. Now, would we have had a heightened concern? Absolutely. We're constantly engaging with our housing partners about making sure that the quality of what they're doing is better. That is why when the protests took to the degree that it did, I did not spend the time defending that the physical infrastructure was better. I deployed a team to take a look door to door, because what I was seeing and what I saw just didn't seem to have that widespread problem. Right? So for instance, I'll address one thing that I heard, rodent infestation. When I became the president, there were rodents all over towers. There's no doubt about that. I even speculated that it was because of the McDonald's. It was a frustrating problem. When we did the renovation, I even met with the McDonald's owner, and I had several conversations with him about, what needed to happen on his property. We were checking to see how often they were taking out the garbage. I mean, it was a vexing problem. Mm-hmm. We've had building inspectors in the buildings, including the towers. They haven't seen, and this is not a problem that you can ameliorate in 2 weeks. If we had a rodent infestation problem to the degree that people were saying, you would see droppings in certain places. That's not something that you're going to ameliorate in a short period of time, and that's just not what we've seen. And that's a fact that while it might be an uncomfortable truth, it is an uncomfortable truth that I have to speak to. We just haven't seen, because I've been there. I've been so significantly concerned about that rodent problem that we recently just bought the McDonald's parking lot, the McDonald's lot, by the way. They have a long-term lease, so the McDonald's is not going to go away anytime soon. But one of my successors is going to be able to get rid of that McDonald's once and for all, and eliminate that issue that it may create, with the towers being so close. But some of these issues, I just haven't seen to that extent. And I do think the physical infrastructure, so I want to be very clear about this. I think the physical infrastructure is better. I think what we have to continue to examine and beg the question about is whether or not the maintenance and the upkeep is at the level that we want and that we're investing appropriately. Our housing partners are investing in that appropriately. In the interim, we're going to fill any gaps that exist with our own staff to make sure that there's nothing, we're not leaving any stone unturned in terms of making sure that that doesn't become an ongoing or chronic issue.
Okay, great, thank you. If I could just ask one more question,
Sure.
and this one, of course, we understand that there are at least 4 demands coming from the protests. And I guess one that the alum would certainly have an interest in is that of the decision that the Board of Trustees has made, the shared governance, or should I say just the new strategy that was determined back in June of this year. And of course, the affiliate trustees, the students, the alum, the faculty. And so the concern, again, is losing that shared governance. And would like to, I guess, ask you, in terms of that decision that was made, was there any other decision or strategy that could have been put in place that would still have allowed the affiliate trustees to remain in place?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think this is probably my best opportunity to address this. So this is a board issue that I want to be very clear of. And obviously, as the president, I'm a member of the board, one person. The board brought in a consultant to look at what the standard practices at universities, and based on that and recommendations that were made, they decided to go with a structure that would still have shared governance but be deployed differently. And that includes several things that the board has been doing. So one is we had meetings of the Student Life Committee this week. The student representative from the HUSA president and the Graduate Student Assembly president both participated in that meeting. They have a vote in that committee. They were pretty vocal and direct about what they think was taking place, et cetera, and they were able to participate there. The Faculty Senate Chair was invited to the Academic Excellence Committee, understanding that he also has to sign an NDA. He feels strongly about the faculty representative being through the prior mechanism, so he chose not to participate. And the Alumni Association president, the HUAA president, participated in the Development and Alumni Relations Committee. I think that those who participated, that was effective. So that's one mechanism. The second mechanism is that we're going to revamp the Board of Visitors for every school and college. And what that will involve is student representation on those committees as well as faculty representation, so that at the level of the school and college, we have an opportunity. The Board of Visitors will also serve as a good proving ground for members that we probably want to bring to the Board of Trustees as well, as an opportunity there. I think, again, that's a good mechanism. There'll be listening sessions by the board for different members of the community to participate in. We have a leadership academy that we started through the Office of Faculty Development, where we have a chair leadership academy, et cetera. We're going to now expand that to students and alum to provide opportunities where they can engage with the Board of Trustee members and participate in what that governance looks like. I mean, it's a difference. It's a different mechanism. It's a different look to the future. And so my advice to us as a community is that we give it an opportunity so that we have a sense of what that looks like to make sure that everyone has a voice and can participate. How you express that voice and where you apply it, is different. I think one of the difficulties with the prior mechanism that we had is that you, as an elected person, do you come to that fiduciary responsibility of the larger body of the board as a union rep or looking at the fiduciary responsibility? So what do I mean by that? I'll give you a very practical example. I have a responsibility that if I think the Department of Surgery at Howard needs to be abolished for financial reasons, risk reasons, etc., I have a responsibility to come into the board meeting and to say to the board, I think that we should do away with the Department of Surgery, despite the fact that that's my home faculty membership, despite the fact that after I do that, I'm probably going to have to resign and go get a job elsewhere. I have to be able to do that. I think it is difficult for others who are elected and feel they have a membership constituency to come and do that. I think it's very different in terms of what happened, what I saw happen this week. We had members, we had students who were very direct about their feelings about the protests and what they feel we should do, very critical of the administration, which I welcome. And the Alumni Association president, I think, had an opportunity to express the voice of his constituency. I think and I sit on, a few boards as well, public and private, and it's a tough place to be in. You want to come and represent your ideas and for the most part, the perspective that you have in terms of your experience, but you have to do that with the fiduciary responsibility, for, I think as the foremost thing that you're thinking about. And I think this is a tough conversation for us to have as a community, and like everything else that we do as a community, I think we have to have that back and forth. I think it would be great if people gave the board an opportunity to see how it works and also to give feedback. And I know the Howard community has never been shy about giving feedback, but I also think, giving the board an opportunity to show, what they intend, it's an opportunity.
Great, thank you. I'm a friend of the chapel, so I know they're going to want me to ask you.
Okay.
Rankin Chapel, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that I'd like to see us return Rankin Chapel to Rankin Chapel. We've had a meeting already to look at that. It's a major project. I had a donor give us $250,000 to do a study on what it would take. It probably would take us $20 million plus to expand the chapel and to fix several things about it that won't pass the building code today. I think it's a project we're doing. We have to go out and raise funds to do that. And to raise $20 million, I think is doable. I have to admit, when I line up kind of where we do it, I don't see, sometimes people ask about priorities. I think we have to do all of these things in parallel. Right? I think Rankin Chapel is an important spiritual home for the campus, but at the same time, I have to replace the physics, chemistry, biology, engineering buildings. Right? I think those things are critical needs that we have. Right? We have to build a new arts and communication center. The needs on this campus total probably $1.2 to $2 billion of work that we need to do. And I think the board is clear. I presented that as clearly as I can. And I think the board is also very supportive of us making the effort that's needed in order to get that done. And I think our financial fortitude that we've found ourselves in gives us an opportunity to embark on that. But I want to be clear, those things are not going to happen overnight. They can't happen all at once. And I hope that we as a community will be willing to say, okay, let's be able to come back here in 2030 and see a totally redone campus. Now, for the students who are here, that's no, warm comfort. But we have to recognize that what we are dealing with now didn't occur overnight, right? These buildings, like I said, they're classrooms I go into that look exactly the same way they look as they did in '88. Now, some people may say, well, you've been president for 8 years, why aren't they all fixed? Well, we inherited the hospitals losing $60 million. Right, so there's several things we had to fix to get in place to then do. We had to get the graduation rate up. There are other blocking and tackling things that we prioritize to do.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, I have another question as well. So during the semester, I've had the opportunity to speak with numerous faculty and staff about the social climate of the university. And from what I've gathered is that the root of the issue and the root of the students' frustration stems from a lack of communication and transparency. And even just silence that students feel that they are met with. They feel unheard, uncared for. So in a general sense, how can we improve communication? Yeah. And on a deeper level of that, how can we see more of the administrators and faculty, not as our administrators, but as people, getting the opportunity to build that personal connection and being able to stop by to say hello and not just, oh, I have a problem.
Sure. It's a great question. So my cabinet is a team of 12. And when I look at the breadth of what we're asking them to do, it's an under-resourced operation in terms of everything that they're doing. I mean, I look at Dr. Du Bois, who's the EVP and COO. The buildings I'm talking about, she's responsible for. Something is breaking every day. DPS reports to Dr. Evers is over student affairs. You have everything from Title IX to residence life. Right? So there's a lot going on in all of those areas. We have to make an effort around the chat and choose and those types of things to engage. I think that's important. One of the mechanisms I use is I still teach. I still make rounds in the hospital, so I get to interact with students. Homecoming Saturday, I operated at 6 a.m. and a junior undergrad student and a junior med student were in there. So I get an opportunity to talk to them about a wide variety of things. I teach a class in the spring semester in the School of Education, a PhD class. And so it's a matter of trying to divide up our time in a way that we can meet all the needs with that engagement, right? I would say that's one mechanism. The second is, I think we have to also build trust and not let the default be that there's a lack of care, right? I think that default, I'm not sure that's where we should start with. I certainly care for every single student on this campus, whether I agree with somebody's perspective or not, right? At the same time, I think what we have to be realistic about is how do we display that care, and are we going to have neglect? So when you talk about silence, for instance, one of the major criticisms I think that I've received over the past couple of weeks is my silence. Part of that is to not be trying to create a counter-narrative about people who are complaining about something, right? And then almost every message you send out gets scrutinized down to the last detail, right? So I'll give you one with an unintended consequence. It was brought to my attention that Sodexo laid off 12 people. Last year, when we shut down quickly, students were irate that Sodexo laid off people. And the demand was that I pay those people. And I said, well, I don't employ them. And we have a pandemic. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pay my own people. I don't want to see people laid off, but that's the reality of the situation we're in. So what I was trying to point out is that there are unintended consequences for a variety of things that may happen at any given time, and that we all have to just acknowledge what those consequences are. I was blamed for closing the cafeteria. We can't have a cafeteria open by the health inspector guidelines if people are sleeping in a hallway right next to the cafeteria. So again, there are more of you than there are of us in terms of tweeting. I'm not going to create a counter-narrative by tweeting against every single thing people tweet against. Now, it's an uncomfortable space to be in because then everybody else owns the narrative, and the narrative can get very negative, right? And I used to think social media mightn't be a real place. I think it's a very real place, and it has very real consequences. I don't like to have a back and forth publicly about what we need to do. I'd much rather sit down and have a conversation and us work out what we do. I'm not on social media. I know you guys see me on social media. My team manages that. I may draft, but I don't read the news feeds. I don't think it's healthy, and I haven't been doing that since 2017. I do get feedback. I get reports every day about what's being said and what we have to do. So yes, we have to do a much better job of communicating. I want to be very clear about that. And we have to push out more of how we communicate the way you want to receive messages, right? And whether that's on social media, whatever the mechanism is, we have to do more of that. But I also think we have to do more of the interpersonal engagement. Some of the issues we just discussed are complicated. I could talk about the endowment for 3-4 hours and still not cover how it works, everything about how it works, why we deploy it a certain way. But that's what we have to do, and we have to create a larger understanding. But remember, every 4 years, we're turning over the entire population, of students at least. And so we do have to make a better effort. I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially around chatting and choose, meeting with administrators. I've been proud of my team for getting out and about and engaging. I think that has been important to do, and that's something that we're going to continue to do. I meet with students all the time. A lot of time it's around academic issues. They want to shadow me in the operating room, or they want to find out how to become a physician, things like that, and I do that one-on-one. I feel that's where my sweet spot is. If I can meet with 10 people every Tuesday and Thursday, I'll do that. I'm happy to do that. But I also think we have to spread that around. You kind of mentioned administrators and faculty. I'll separate that because I actually do think the faculty do a lot around engaging with students. I think they go above and beyond, and I think that's another thing that's important on this campus and something that's unique to the campus, but different. And I think some of you will go to grad school elsewhere. Some of you may have gone to undergrad at different places. And I think what you'll find is that the access to the president varies on those campuses based on what the president's responsibility is. I attended Howard, like I said, from 88 to 94, and I saw the president at graduation, right? Probably in two circumstances, right? And so it's different. Now, I wasn't looking for the president. I'll admit that as well. I didn't know what the provost did, so it was a different type of engagement. I think at Howard, the expectation is that the president is going to interact with everyone, students, faculty, and administrators, and I get that as well. But there's a lot to fill the day with doing that. We certainly have to prioritize that one-on-one engagement, and I certainly am committed to doing that.
Yes, well, thank you. And another question I had. So I think something that has been an issue in my matriculation at Howard University is just the feeling of being safe around campus. So a lot of our students do not feel safe walking around at night, especially a lot of our female students walking to their dorms or places, walking back from the library, the catcalling by the locals just camping outside of the dorms, even locals getting inside the dorms. There's numerous instances in which we have saw that. So how can we improve campus security and even improve the feeling of being safe on campus?
So this is a great question. So a couple of things. One of the things that Howard students have always made a decision to do is to keep the campus open. That's a tough decision. If you go to USC, which is in South Central LA, it's basically enclosed from the neighborhood. That's something that we could go to. I don't think students at Howard want that, right? That's my sense, but that's a discussion we're happy to have and revisit. When I came to Howard in 1988, this was the murder capital of the world. I lived off campus. I turned in my housing application late, so I didn't get housing as a freshman, and I lived in Northeast DC. I took the H2 bus and then came down on the 70 bus. The students that I would travel with went to Banneker, and because I was 16, I looked younger, they thought I was going to Banneker, so they would talk to me. And the way they would describe Howard students, always kind of bothered me, because they felt like we were these elite rich kids who were attending this university across the street, and that wasn't the people I was interacting with every day. So I think even when we think about the neighborhood, I want us to be cautious. It's gentrifying, so it's changing, but I want us to be sensitive about what we're talking about. I've asked the athletics team to have, a night for the neighborhood when we do Midnight Madness, and so you'll see that on Tuesday night when we launch basketball. I think we have to look for opportunities to bring, members of the community into the university, and at the same time, make sure that people understand who we are. Now, the safety thing is a significant issue. Crime is up all around America. That's an issue. What we've tried to do and what the chief of police has tried to do is to extend that perimeter, right? So if you go down 4th Street, you'll see MPD there late at night. And that's because of the catcalling and those things that we don't want to have occurring. So since that's our residence hall corridor, they've started trying to get a patrol car there. So a big part of the problem is us trying to extend it. The second thing, which I've read about, interestingly enough, is that this issue of visitation. And that's why that becomes a complicated issue. There's a safety issue connected to it, right? So not that we don't want to treat students like adults and have you have visitation fairly liberally, but part of that is who is coming into the dorm. So recently, for instance, we discovered at Drew, people are opening a back door and a side door and letting people in. And that's not fair to the other residents, right? They may be letting people in that they're comfortable with, but that doesn't mean that you're sharing a communal space. We have to all play our role in that, right? We're going to try to lock those doors down, have them key access, but we have to get students to participate in what that looks like. And I think it's important that we all are just mindful of where we are, what we do. We also have to educate students more about what's available to them, because getting an escort is something that the chief of police and DPS supply. And so we want people to use that mechanism as they move around. The chief of police has security info sessions in the residence halls. They're not well attended right now. It's not a fun topic, I get that. But to enhance safety, he wants to educate people about what to do, what to be thinking about, you know, how to kind of look at your surroundings. And so I think we have to have that balance of making sure that you have, you know, certain freedom, that we engage the community in the right ways as well, but also that we all are doing the right things. We can't leave doors open. We can't be letting people in on side doors. There's a reason why we want everybody checked in at the desk when we have incidents in the dorm. And that's our mechanism to figure out who was there. And if we're going around that mechanism, you know, we're not going to be as safe as we could be. I'm getting several prompts to take questions from the audience as well. So I want to encourage the audience, but I also want to encourage, you know, you guys answer. I'll have Drew probably ask me another question while, you know, anybody from the audience who wants to start thinking about coming up could do that.
I have two quick questions about funding. The first is on behalf of Houston Senate. They have an initiative where they want to create a student emergency fund. They would just want to know if you think that's possible and where that funding would come from. Ideally, students would get $250 a semester or a year, and what that would go towards is rent, transportation costs, groceries, anything, any type of emergency that might arise.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think we need to be clear about who will make that decision and how we do it. I know through IFAC right now, we have a mechanism to look at that. We can look at funding that through IFAC as an example, or we could look at funding it through part of the unrestricted gift we got from Mackenzie Scott. What I would encourage you, sir, to think about is what the criteria would be and who would adjudicate that, so that we have a fair system, you know, about how that's done. But that's not something that I foresee as a problem at all.
Thank you. My second question, it initially pertained to public interest law students, but also could pertain to students at the undergrad who are perhaps working at internships that are unpaid. That's a huge issue, I know, at the law school, and we wanted to know if funding was available for law students who have unpaid internships. Right now, we do have, I'm an executive member of the Public Interest Law Society, and we do have a scholarship through the student organization, but we wanted to know if there was internal university funding that we could be offering students as well.
Yeah, right now we don't have something that dedicated to that, but I think that sounds like a great thing for Dean Holly Walker and I to go out and raise money for. You know, I think it's good. Now, one of the things we have been doing when you look at our workforce development is we've been trying to avoid having people come to us for partnerships with students doing internships and not getting paid. So that's why, like with Howard West, Howard Entertainment, students are getting credit and getting a stipend while we do that, for that very reason. Because I tell everybody who wants to partner with us that our students have significant financial needs. So to have them move to a city for the summer, not pay them, is not something that I'm interested in. And you'll see a lot of the partnerships we do, we try to avoid that. But to your point, like with public interest law, you know, some of those places that you guys are going to probably can't afford to pay you as well. So I do think that that's something for us to look at and to raise funds toward.
Hello? Yeah. Okay, my name is Peter Samora. I'm a freshman here. So I never experienced Howard pre-COVID. So this is my only experience. And a lot of the freshmen that I've talked to are personally mad at you, like the president. They see a lot of stuff online about how you make a lot of money, and it's like you're making all this money, but you're not doing your job. And I don't think they fully understand how it's not as simple as you want to do this, so this happens. You have a board and you have a team that you have to talk to. And I think they're frustrated and mad because they don't fully understand the process. So can you explain to them like how decisions are actually made and how like that affects how fast things happen and how things can happen?
Yeah, sure. First, let me address this issue about what I make. You know, I came into this job, I was a full-time surgeon in the hospital prior to becoming the provost, and I elected to continue operating. I still do. I don't bill for the cases that I do, so I certainly don't make anything close to what I would if I was operating full-time or if I was billing for those cases. So just to clarify in terms of what I do. And I operate at least twice a month, and that's something that, you know, I've negotiated with the board that I won't bill directly for those cases, but I would continue to operate and teach and stuff like that. So just to put that in perspective. On the issue of, you know, how this works, yeah, one person does not run the university by themselves, right? You have a board that has the fiduciary responsibility. You have to take things back to them. They are making fiduciary decisions. I also will admit that I probably have adopted a slightly different style to some of my predecessors in that I don't feel I have to sign off on everything. I try to hire competent people to run the areas that they do, and my expectation is that they will do that. I'm not into micromanaging those areas, and I think there's an expectation that the president will sign off on everything or correct everything, and I don't think a university can thrive in that environment. Now, ultimately, I have to take the responsibility, and I recognize that, but I do think that we hire very competent people to run all of the different areas that they have to run. And if we don't get the performance that we expect, we certainly are not going to be apprehensive about changing those folks out. So you're right, it is complicated in terms of how it happens and who has to do what and what that role and responsibility is. Like, I just want to be clear, it ultimately is my responsibility, but I expect the VPs, the cabinet members, the deans, et cetera, to do what they have to do. You know, an example is, you look at the Office of Undergraduate Studies, where you're going to get advising, et cetera. You know, I think we have a very good person there in Dr. Anderson. We had Dr. Carter, who was very good as well. And so my expectation is they would do it. So when students email me, for example, I push those emails back to them. And I also monitor how many of those emails I'm getting. So if I see a trend, then I meet with Dr. Anderson, right, to do that. But the expectation that I'm going to, you know, be the person to advise a student or to go correct that, I don't think is a realistic one. I think that's a good question, and I understand that frustration, right? That's what happens with CEOs and people who are in charge. So I still think the buck stops with me. I want to be clear about that, but that's why we do hire a team to, you know, perform the breadth of what has to happen at the university.
Okay, thank you. I think that'll clear up a lot of like misunderstanding between you and the students, because Howard is the mecca. Like, it's really built up like a lot. Like, this is the HBCU of HBCU. Like, everywhere you go, it's like you go to Howard, you're an elitist, like you're one of the top people. So it's like, as a whole, like, we represent HBCUs. And I see a lot of stuff online about how, hello. But I see a lot of stuff online where it's like, I'm glad I didn't go to an HBCU because look at what's happening to Howard. And I don't think that's right, because personally, I've been grateful enough to like not have to experience mold in my room. I've been like very lucky, and the staff that I've met have helped me a lot already, and it's only been a month. And I'm a freshman, so for me to experience this help, I really think it's like the hate is over exaggerated a bit, and I understand it's a serious issue, but I also think that the hate is played out because it gets attention. So a lot of people are hating on the school because when they didn't get in, or it's like they expected something that was an unrealistic dream that they had in their head, and still don't understand like there's people running this stuff. So I just want to say thank you for like what you're doing.
Appreciate that. Let me. Before you pose your question, Monique, I still want to respond to that. You know, I think there are a couple of things about Howard that I think there are a couple of things about this university we all need to think about, and that is that this is a special place, but it's made up of people, not bricks and mortar. And the most damaging thing about these things that gets to me is I know what the staff puts in when they come to work and what they're trying to do. And so to blanketly say the administration or the staff does bother me, does hurt me. I worked in financial aid as a student. The woman who supervised me was incredible. She'd come in here on Labor Day, on holidays, you know, to do what she had to do. And so I do want to encourage all of us as a community to be thoughtful about that, because I do think that self-hate does bother me in terms of how we go at each other. And that's why sometimes I disengage from that back and forth, because I just don't think it's healthy. And I also don't think it's fair in terms of putting it in perspective. I think we have to be careful about that. And we also have to understand who we are. Like I said, the graduation rate when I was here was only 22%. And I think we miss that. We have this image of who we are in our head, but we're not realistic about who we are. And so when I see a graduation rate like that and I try to move the needle, I think people just assume that this is what the graduation rate is, right? I think if people say, I don't want to engage. I don't want people, I don't care if you're protesting or you're upset about something, I don't want people cursing at people. I mean, I just think that there's some dignity things that we have to just do a better job of. And I know who those staff are, and I know who the administrators are, and they're not just nameless people, right? They're people who, they've lost loved ones during the pandemic. They've had hardships like everybody else has had, and we owe them that grace as well. And so I certainly appreciate, appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, President Frederick, colleagues, students, alum. My name is Monique McClung. I'm the president of the Howard University Staff Organization. Echo those comments as well, and we do care, especially the staff here. We care about you guys a lot. I have a two-part question. President Frederick, I know that the pandemic has softened a bit how you feel about working remotely. And with regards to the inflation rate, and we talked about supply chain issues, has your stance on COLA increases softened at all? And can you share with us any imminent plans for staff increases? And then the second part of that question is with regards to the Board of Trustees, what do you see would be the mechanism for staff to engage with the board?
Yeah, great questions. First, let me start with what everybody may not understand what you were posing your question around. Because you started off with a comment about how I feel about teleworking. I worry about teleworking because I think we have a high-touch university. We have more students who get financial aid here than the typical university, and as a result, we have to have robust customer service engagement. And I just worry that if we do that from a remote site, we won't get it right. And so just to clarify, it's not that I'm stuck in an old age and I don't want people to be able to work from home and use technology. I just want to make sure that we don't compromise customer service as we do that. And so that's what Monique and I have had several conversations about that. And yes, my stance has softened with the pandemic. I recognize that we can do more from a remote site, and I certainly I'm supportive of that. We have to do something with respect to the COLA increases. There's no doubt about that. The inflation that's there is there. I want to give a disclaimer that I do sit on the Federal Reserve Board for Richmond, and so I'm not going to talk about interest rates, but I do see data. And inflation is going to be probably stickier than we think, right? If you think of, initially we were thinking it's a used car issue, and then we started saying it's a chip issue, and now you look at everything: food, pork, beef, chicken, everything. The price is up, and that's probably going to stick for a longer while. So we are going to have to support our staff with greater benefits. But I also want to remind everyone that I think we have a track record of doing that, right? Last year, in the middle of the pandemic, the board approved to take $80 million out of the endowment and give it to the retiree pension fund. So we went from that being 84% funded to 99% funded. I think that demonstrated, what we think about the people who work here and when they retire, wanting to secure their pension. If you make $35,000 and less, we pay for your health insurance fully. Those were decisions that we've made over the past couple of years, because I do think the staff, needs to be rewarded and does deserve, our support, not just more support, but our financial support. One of the reasons we went to Workday was because I felt we needed to use technology better so you could do your jobs better as well. So yes, I certainly think more people probably need to work from home. I just don't want to see any kind of a dip in customer service. We're not great at it right now. We have to get great at it. And so that's my tension with respect to telework. Listen, I realize that we've gone over. Let me first thank Drew Lewis, Ty Jones, and Alberta Forbes Baker. Yep.
It's Debbie Allen.
I'm sorry.
I am here, and I just want to say I thank you so much for this incredible information about the strategic plan and all that you're doing to raise funds to making Howard stay where she is. Howard University has made it possible for me to do everything that I'm doing. All the celebrations that I've had this year, I come right back to Howard. All my greatest accomplishments come right back to Howard. So I walked in today into the middle of what it seemed like a spirited protest. I didn't quite know what all was happening. I just want to say that I want to commit to being here to support you and this university and our students and give you my time, because your effort is so on the right road. And I think there's some wonderfully spirited, dedicated young people who have ideals that certainly need to be heard and addressed. But there were also some people that child were talking to me about. I was a producer on So You Think You Can Dance. I'm like, child, what are you doing up in here? Go home. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that I was here, and that to say to all of you that Howard University is the Mecca of historically black colleges, and we must build her up, even while we're chipping away at things we need to change.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay. It's great to see you. That is as unscripted as it comes. You know, I think right there you saw the beauty of Howard. You know, to be quite honest, I spoke to VP Harris about a week ago. She called me just to check in on what was going on and offer some advice. And I mean, I think that's what we are and who we are. And while you have the Debbie Allens and the VP Harris, the reality is that we have about 80,000 living alum who are all doing what we expect Howard alum to do every day. And they probably don't get enough recognition. And that's who you, the students, are going to become, just like myself. So I hope it's clear that we are trying to take the university to a different place. There's a long drive to the mountaintop. It's not always going to be easy. It's going to have its bumpy moments, like this moment that we're in. But ultimately, the strength of who we are is going to be how we come together and how we move together. So I appreciate everybody taking the time. For the virtual audience as well, I appreciate you tuning in. And for you, the students who showed up here today, thank you for your time as well. I appreciate it. So thank you.